we've been celebrating all afternoon, 50 years of Focal Point Gallery. Now we're back at
one of my galleries, second one. Out of the 50 years that I've been on City Island, this is the second one. First one was at 296, and that's what, half a block away from here, and 6 years in this location before moving to where I am now, where that's 40 years.
So earlier this summer, we had an opportunity to sit down with you, and we talked at length pretty much the whole afternoon. And despite knowing you for about 40 years now, I learned a lot that day, and I hope the viewers will enjoy it as well.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope
so. Congratulations on 50 years here. It's
incredible. Thank you. I'm only doing what I love to do. I mean, that's. I'm overwhelmed by the recognition and the appreciation that I've experienced today.
For context, today is May 29th, 2024. So it's somebody's birthday week.
That's right.
So 2 days ago we were at the Memorial Day parade together.
That was fun.
Just in time. That was your birthday?
That was my birthday, May 27th. I was born 1949.
Where were you born?
I'm born in the Bronx, and I'm very proud to be from the Bronx. I'm a first generation. My parents came from Europe, Vienna particularly. They have a very interesting story. I remember growing up on Daly Avenue, which was right a block from the Bronx Zoo. So my playground was the zoo. We would hop the fence every day and go into the zoo, and we would play football in the zoo, or just run around. And I knew the zoo inside and out growing up, and it was a nice neighborhood. I enjoyed living there. My parents then decided that the neighborhood was getting pretty bad. There were gangs already. They were worried about me. They worried more about me than my brother. My brother was more stable than I was. I kind of got into trouble, or somehow trouble would find me. I don't know which came first. So they moved to Rochambeau Avenue off of Meshulah Parkway. I was going into 9th grade at the time. That was a hard transition for me because I was leaving all my friends behind at an awkward age.
So you entered high school with all new people?
Yeah, I had to start, 9th grade. Back then, you went up to 9th grade before you went into high school.
Oh, you did?
Right. So 7th, 8th, and 9th was considered junior high school. Okay. And everybody who, when I went into 9th grade, they all knew each other. They were with each other since grammar school in that neighborhood. And for me, it was like I was an outsider. I did make some friends, but it wasn't the same. It really wasn't the same. And then I went to DeWitt Clinton for high school. And, then I tried college, but that didn't work out very well.
Where'd you go?
I went to, at the time, it was called Hunter Uptown, but then the name switched while I was still there to Lehman. So I went to Lehman. Never graduated.
So when your first home, like, was it an attached house, apartment? What kind of living situation was it?
I grew up in a tenement.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was a walk-up. We lived on the 3rd floor. Actually, we started on the 1st floor in a studio apartment, and then made our way up to the 3rd floor in a much bigger apartment. But it was a walk-up. It was really long stairs, very steep. Yeah, I remember, it was when we moved, and my parents sprung that on me when we moved to Rochambeau Avenue, and we go into the building. I'm looking around and I'm going like, I didn't know yet that this is where I was going to live. They said, we want to show you something. I said, all right, So I take a look. I see there's 2 elevators. I go like, wow, this is fancy. Not just 1, but 2 elevators. Oh my God. And they said, well, this is going to be your new home. I went like, wow, we're moving up. The only problem was right across the street was the school. So I heard the bells all the time, those goddamn bells. And they never shut them off in the summertime. And my windows faced the school. I looked into the schoolyard and I would hear those bells going off. I said, oh, I got to get to school. But yeah.
Even in the summer.
Yeah, and from there I moved to, I got married and moved to Davidson Avenue off of Fordham and Jerome. Then I found my way to City Island.
When did you first set foot on City Island?
I had known of City Island, but didn't know City Island. I think I came here once to go fishing with my dad. I was a little kid. Then another time I came to City Island, took out, it was a date, a double date, and ate in the Black Whale.
Oh, wow.
Yep, that was in the 60s. Oddly enough, I worked at the Einstein for a while. And I worked with, in the neurophysiology department. I was the computer operator, and at that point, I was doing photography, and I did photograph the slides for them. And I met a student there, Chris Wertenbaker, and he lived on City Island. Chris was an interesting guy, and he lived on City Island. And I asked him, can I come over to his place and do what I called environmental portrait? Take a picture of the person in their home. So I came to City Island again, and after I did his, spent some time with him, taking pictures, wandered around a little bit on City Island, and never thought much about it. Then shortly afterwards, I get a letter in the mail about an arts and crafts show that was taking place on City Island. And they were looking for people to exhibit. And I was about to finish, I was going to graduate photography school. I went to Germain School of Photography, which was basically a commercial photographic school. That's all they did. And that's what I needed. I wanted to be an artist, and I decided I was going to do it with photography. I brought my portfolio case with the pictures I had done in school. I showed it to, I think it was Ellen LeBeau, who is an artist. Tony was there. Then Warren came over. Mary Coulter, that was Tony's wife at the time. And they looked at it and they loved the work. I'd never experienced that before. Because up to that time, I was taking my work around in the city trying to get exhibitions, trying to show my work. And for more than 5 years, I was doing that. I would make appointments and I would go and show my work, and it was not a very nice experience. But I continued. I mean, the way you're treated was in the city was not nice. It just, they didn't treat you like a person. At least that was my experience. I remember one time coming back home, I was so disgusted with being treated and the response to my work. I remember waiting for the train, and I was like, why am I doing this? And I thought to myself, I'm going to throw myself in front of a train. This is what I want to do for my life, and I'm getting rejected. And I realized You want to throw yourself in front of the train, but not just your portfolio case. I said, you believe in what you do. You believe in yourself. You're not going to do that. You're going to prove that you can do what you want to do. And coming to City Island and showing my work and getting that response, I said, I want to continue doing this. They gave me a big row of fence. I put up my work and took part in the first Arts and Crafts Fair. And that was in 1974. And the response of people coming and looking at my work was wonderful. I even sold a piece to Peter Coyle. Peter Coyle, City Islander, came, looked at the work. I remember my picture. It was of, I had a lizard at home that I had photographed. I had to do, one of the subject matters was close-up photography. So I took a picture of the lizard. Poor lizard didn't survive. I think I put, the lights were too hot on the lizard. But I got a nice shot of the lizard. And Peter liked it. And he bought it. I forget how much I sold it for. Maybe like $10. 16 by 20, nicely matted. And we talked and we became friends right away. And so the experience was so rewarding that I went to Warren, who I became friends with. I became friends with everybody, but there was something about Warren and myself that just clicked. I think it was, he was as passionate about what he was doing as I was. So it was like two crazy people being attracted to each other. We understood each other. And I said, hey, Warren, what do you think if I opened up a gallery on City Island? Right away, he said, great idea. And he said, I hope you find a store. So the first store we went to was next to Buddy's hardware store. Buddy owned an old trolley that he used for storage.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, before that, it was actually called Trudy's Trolley. And it was a jewelry store. But it was an old-fashioned trolley. And Buddy said, no, I can't do it because it's not safe. At that point, it had become so dilapidated that it wasn't safe. So Warren said, oh, there's another place. So we go about a block and a half, and there was a big store. He got the name of the person who owned it, Mrs. Angelora, and I went in. It was huge, huge space. It was like loft-sized space. And didn't have heat, didn't have hot water. I didn't even think about that. I just saw the space. I said, yeah, this is great. How much? $250 a month. I said, okay. And I asked, is it okay? Because my marriage wasn't working out at that time. I found out what I wanted to be. I married very, very young. I was 20, she was 17. And she found out what she didn't want. She wasn't happy. I was very happy. And I realized that I loved photography more than anything else. And that was a problem. So that was an answer for me to move in. So I kind of left. We understood it. We parted friends. Her life continued, and she was very happy, and she became very successful, found somebody wonderful. And I moved into the back of my store and lived in the back. There was no heat, no hot water, but lo and behold, Peter, who I sold my first photograph to, who became a good friend, was a plumber. He said, well, get a potbelly stove. And, you know, you'll burn wood. There was a huge chimney, and so that worked okay. Now, if you remember, I mentioned I worked at Einstein with a bunch of scientists. I was a technician, so I knew a lot of scientists. And one of the scientists that worked there, Bob Muller, was sitting around my potbelly stove, getting warm, because now it's a novelty. You know, we're talking and we're saying, you know, well, I don't have any hot water. I had a kettle, so I was getting hot water that way. He said to Peter, because he and Peter were friends, how about if you put copper coils around the stove and feed the water from the bathroom, and it goes around the stove, it'll come back hot. Can you do that, Peter? Peter liked the idea. He said, yeah. So he went and he got, you know, all the tubing he needed, set it up, and I had my hot water. It looked like a distill. I mean, it looked like I was, you know, going to cook moonshine. It was a strange way of living. I didn't really think about it. I just did it out of necessity. I had to learn how to, you know, make a fire quick. Being cold is no fun. Being cold and hungry, I don't know which one is worse. I think almost being cold was worse, because somehow I always managed to get food from someplace. But being cold, that was tough. I went through a lot of wood. I got into really good shape. I stayed in great shape. I went through, I figured, at least 10 cords of wood a season. And fortunately, City Island is surrounded by Pelham Bay Park. And I'd go into Pelham Bay Park, and I would, wood that was down on the ground, I would fill up my car with it and bring it back. And every day, every single day, rain, snow, didn't matter, I got wood. And when I ran out of wood, I burnt tables, I burnt chairs, whatever I had laying around, I would burn it. I know I'm going off topic, but...
No, it's okay.
You know, City Islanders, back then, it was a small neighborhood. There was maybe 1,500 people living here. So people got to know that, you know, that I was living in the back of my store. Even though you weren't supposed to, nobody said anything. The City Islanders, which is back then was a very close community, liked me, and I'm fortunate. I offered a service. I did portraits, I did restoration work. I did whatever I could to survive. I still kept my job at the, at that time it was at Downstate already. It had transferred over to Downstate.
How old were you when you got the job at Einstein? Was that?
Oh, when I got
you
the
dropped
job
out
at
of
Einstein
college
before coming to City Island, the very first job I got that introduced me into lab work was Montefiore. I was 17. I got out of school at 12 o'clock. There was triple session. That Deal with Clinton, that was the time when there was, I can't even think how many kids went to that school. They had triple session. And I went to the very early session at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I got out at 12. Now I had the whole day ahead of me. My brother worked in the rheumatic disease unit at Montefiore Hospital as a lab helper. How he got that job was my father was the parasitologist. He was a lab technician, chief lab technician of parasitology. He ran the parasitology lab. And across the hall was the rheumatic disease unit. They needed a lab helper. My brother got the job. He went off to college. There was an opening, and I needed to do something. I took it over. And I worked there for a long time, went into the private industry, and worked as a lab technician in White Plains in a private lab. That went belly up. And my mom worked at Einstein. So there's a lot of nepotism going on. That's life. I mean, that's how things work. And I was married already. And now I'm unemployed. But my mom knew that the guy that she worked for was looking for a lab technician. So I went for the interview. And at that point, I was into photography already. Before I went to school, I was teaching myself photography. I had my own, I built my darkroom in my apartment. It was a closet, and the bathroom was connected, you know, that was the bathroom. I was doing pottery. The kitchen was my pottery studio. So when he heard that I had lab experience and photography experience, he hired me right away. And my job was to run a computer. I didn't know what I was running. I mean, the experiments that he did, but I ran a computer. And here I am on a computer all day long again.
Eventually you found photography.
Oh, yeah. Well, I always wanted to be an artist as a kid growing up. I always wanted to be an artist because my grandmother was an artist. And I grew up watching her paint. She was an artist back in Europe. My parents had to escape Nazism. My grandmother was recognized as a painter already in Europe, in Vienna. She went to the best Viennese art schools, and you know, she was trained, and she started her career in Vienna, and it was interrupted. That's my mother's mother, mother and father. They sent my mother and her sister to the United States to escape. They went underground, and they spent the whole war underground. My mother was seeing my father already. They were childhood sweethearts. I'm going off topic, but it's an interesting story.
No, it's good.
They were childhood sweethearts. And the families knew each other because they knew that eventually these two were going to get married. But then, you know, things got really bad in Vienna. Vienna was not the place to be during, you know, Nazism. That was one of the bad places. So independently, my mother was sent over to the United States with her sister. And because she had an aunt in the United States, which helped you to leave. My father had to escape with his family. He told me, if I'm not mistaken, that they went via Holland, and they escaped that way. They did not know what happened to each other.
Did they know that
No, they did not know
the
what
other was sent to America?
They had no idea. They had no idea. The way it was explained to me, you didn't know what was going to happen. You just, like I said, my grandparents had to go. My mother's family, mother and father, had to go underground.
Now, why they have to go underground?
Because they didn't have the money, I would imagine, to pay to leave. They had just enough to send their two daughters. My mother, being the oldest, had to leave. She was young, and she had to take care of her sister, who was like 5 years younger. And it's an interesting thing. My mother remembers everything. Wow. Everything. To this day? Oh, yes. Really? But if I talk to my aunt, my mom's sister, who was 5 years, remembers nothing of it. Remembers absolutely nothing.
And your mom's sister is the younger?
Yes, younger by 5 years, and she's still alive too. My mother and father don't know if either one of them are alive. Parts of the family, Parts of my father's family made it over. Parts of my mother's family made it over, but they really didn't know who. And it was the World's Fair at the time in Queens. And my mother hears my father's aunt's voice, and she had a very distinctive voice. And she said, and her name was Ninny, Ninny, Ninny! And she ran to her. She found her because she followed the voice. And she said, "Where's Hugo? Where's Hugo? Is he alive?" And my parents were reunited. They started dating again. They got married. My mom was 17 when she got married. My father being 4 years older, that would make him 21, I believe. And they got married. He got drafted immediately. And my mother followed him to boot camp. He was shipped over to Germany to fight the Nazis. And my mom was pregnant with my brother. And he spent, the war years there. He, of course, his native language was German. And they used him to go behind lines to try to convince the soldiers, because this was towards the end of the war, to surrender. So he had a lot of great war stories.
So he was drafted later in the war.
Yeah, he spent the later years.
And what year did they come here?
Gee, I'm not 100% sure. I would have to call my mom now and ask. I could do that if you want.
Yeah,
Okay, let me find you. Call mom home.
Calling mom home.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, dear.
Okay, listen. I'm being interviewed, and you and Dad came up as a topic. And what year did you come to the United States? Do you remember what year that was?
Yes, 1938.
1938. And Dad at that time as well, 1938.
Yes.
Okay. And you ran into Tanta Ninny at the World's Fair, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know what year Dad had to go back to Germany to fight in the war?
Well, yes, in 1943.
In 1943. Okay.
Yes.
And then what year did he come back to the United States after the war? Do you remember that?
I'm still asleep.
You did great, Mom. Are you kidding? I appreciate it. Okay. If I have any other questions, were there any other questions that you had?
Where did they first meet?
Oh,
when they were kids.
When you were kids, where did you first meet?
In the movie.
Yeah, I remember that. In a movie, right? And you were the forward one, right? You're the one who picked up Dad.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too.
All right, Mom. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
That's very nice.
5 years after the war, my mother's parents were able to come to the United States. And lo and behold, they brought a son with them. So my uncle, who's only 5 years older than me, my mother never met him. They come, and now my mother has a very young brother. So I grew up with being the youngest. My uncle, like a brother, because they lived around the corner from me. My brother.
About the same age.
Yeah, there was just a year difference between my brother and my uncle and me. So it was the three of us. Wow. Yeah, so we did everything together. So my uncle was like my brother.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tom. His name was Tom, Uncle Tom. Go figure. My mom's name is Alice, and my father's name is Hugo. And the last name is Terner, which is unusual because of the spelling. It's Terner, which is a very unusual spelling. So probably if somebody who has the name Terner with an E somehow is a relative. My mom's family name, my grandfather, my mom's father, is Katz. Now the story goes when my grandfather and grandmother came to the United States, Ellis Island, and he changed his name because he didn't think Katz was going to make it. And he liked Kellogg's cornflakes, so he changed his name to Kellogg.
Who was your biggest artistic influence growing up?
Definitely my grandmother, my mother's mother. I called her Mutti. Everybody called her Mutti. Her name, Ann Kellogg. She, like I said, my grandfather changed their name from Katz to Kellogg. But Mutti was definitely a major influence. I wanted to be just like her. I loved watching her paint. She had this lust for life, even though she had been through so much, and she really had. She still loved everything about life. She was wonderful to be around. And as a little kid, I would just want to be with her. And she would take me to the museum, the Metropolitan. We would walk around. She would tell me stories about the paintings, about the artists. She made the paintings come to life. And not only did I learn how to appreciate and learn how to look at artwork, I would learn the history behind the artwork. She was my teacher without having to be a teacher. It was just being together, and I'm absorbing all of this wonderful knowledge that she had. I look at my work and I see her. I see my composition as her composition. It's amazing. Being a little kid, I remember this so vividly. I was painting with her, and she said, "Now you got to you got to wash your brushes." And I'm a little kid, maybe 8 years old, and we're at the sink, and she takes a bar of soap, and she shows me, you wash it. And as she's doing it, and we're doing it together with the bar of soap, I see she's doing stuff with her fingers. And then by the time she was finished, there was a sculpture in my hand. She carved out a sculpture. It was amazing. I just enjoyed, being around her. Everybody did. Everybody loved Mutti. She was just a unique individual. And the hardest thing, I think, was when she lost her eyesight. And I remember I had given her many exhibitions in the gallery. She lived long enough to see that I made a commitment to become an artist and using photography to express myself. I identify as a photographer. And I use my tool of photography to express myself, and that's my art. Interestingly enough, my mom, when I made the commitment by moving here to City Island and opening up a gallery, and my mother and father saw what I was moving into, a cold water flat, no heat, no hot water. The place was a disaster. The place was a total disaster that I was moving into. I had made more than 10 trips with a U-Haul to the dump to clean out the crap that was in that store that I was taking over. Now here's my mom, who I never saw cry, go through all kinds of shit, you know, and she, I saw her, she started to well up in tears like, this is what my son's gonna do? Which I never understood. I said, Mom, you grew up with an artist. Your mother was an artist. Why are you, you know, upset that this is what I'm going to do? She said, I just never wanted that for my son. It's not an easy life. Recently, I said to my mom, I'm celebrating 50 years of the gallery. And she said, I'm very proud of you. It meant a lot to me. Sorry.
How did your dad feel about you choosing to this path?
He compared what I was going to do here in the first gallery with a Herculean task. I think Hercules was given 7 tasks by the gods that he had to fulfill. There's a certain name for it, which I don't remember. And he said that's what I had to undertake. And he, I think he was very proud of me. Yeah. I think fathers are different than mothers that way. You know, mothers are more protective. And I think my father was proud of me, you know, for what I wanted to do. And he helped in his own way to, you know, I remember him showing up one winter. I lived 4 years in the back of the gallery that way. And he showed up with a cord of wood to help.
So right now we're sitting in, this is the 3rd iteration of Focal Point?
This is the 3rd location, yeah. The first location, the address is 296. And what's interesting about that number, certainly that was life-changing for me. 296, City Island Avenue, was definitely a life change. I left a marriage, came to open up a gallery on City Island, called it Focal Point Gallery. It was a new life for me. So that number 296, surprisingly enough, that number came up once before. This was during Vietnam, where they were drafting, you know, everybody. And I dropped out of college at that point. And as soon as you dropped out of college, they called you up. The only thing that kept you out of the draft was that you were in college, or if you were a teacher. And as soon as the next day, I dropped, it was the next day, I was in front of my draft board. I had to, on Girard Avenue, I had to go to a hearing, 10 men, to, you know, decide my fate. And they said, pack your bag. I remember my parents went with me. They said, he's going back to school. He's going to go back. And pack your bag. Wait for your papers to come. I was married. I had discovered I was going to be a photographer. My whole life was now on hold because I was going to go get shipped off and fight in a war. And I didn't get my papers yet, but within that week's time, Nixon created the lottery system. And guess what number I got? 296. And that's the number of my first store, 296. That number changed my life twice. I'm still waiting for them to call me up. They never called me.
I think you're good.
You knew if you got a high number, you weren't going to get called.
My dad was fortunate that way too. His number was very high. He knew there was no chance.
There was no chance.
There was no
And
chance.
if they did call.
His best friend, I think, was close.
Yeah. Yeah, those, my friends who did get a low number, they enlisted into, I have one friend enlisted in the Navy. You know, they this way, some way that maybe you won't get to see action.
Gotcha.
So
Try to sign up for something
yeah, a little
a
safer.
little safer ahead of time, like.
Yeah, so my number was 296. So the first store was 296. I was 4 years there. And then the landlord's son was making my life pretty miserable because he wanted the store for himself. And so he made it very uncomfortable for me to be there until finally his mother said, Ron, you got to go. At that point, I was married again. I married Neru, who you know, Rajeev's mom. She's Indian, and I wanted to go to India. I wanted to meet the family now that I married. Neru was the only one in this country.
How did you meet?
She walked into the gallery. Like you heard me say to my mom, I never picked anybody up. She showed interest in me. So she's an artist, and she showed me her work. That's how she came to my gallery. And eventually we got married. And now this was happening in the gallery, making life miserable for her and for me. She lived in the back of the gallery with me for 3 of those 4 years. Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. So she was there with you in the first gallery.
Yeah. Yeah. And we left. We got to go to India, and I did not know what was going to happen. You know, I thought that was the end of Focal Point Gallery. Addie Esposito, I don't know if you know Addie. Addie Esposito, at that time, owned 278 City Island Avenue, which was called the Surf Shop. It's on the corner. And she came to me, and she said, I heard you're leaving. If you come back, if you want to open up your store, Focal Point Gallery, this store will be waiting for you because they're leaving. I mean, that's City Island. So I said, that'd be fantastic. So we spent 3 months in India. I did a lot of photography. That's going to be part of the retrospective 50th anniversary of Focal Point is going to be in the show. That's going to be one of the topics, I hope, if I get to it in time. We came back and we built at 278 City Island Avenue. And great location, very successful. At that point already, the jewelry and crafts had expanded, which was really Neru's doing. And it supported the gallery. I would do shooting in Mexico, got a motorhome, a pickup truck and camper, made a number of trips, take 3 months off in the wintertime when it's dead on City Island. We'd buy a lot of merchandise, bring it back, sell it. I would work on the images that I took and exhibit the images. And that was what we did for a long time. The landlord, Addie, sold the building, and Red Brennan bought it. I don't know if you know Red. A lot of wonderful people. He bought it. Everything was good. Red and Ula, his wife. And Red decided out of the blue that he was a dock builder, that he wanted my space for an office. And he said, Ron, I'm going to ask you to leave. I went, Red, you can't do that to me. He said, I want it as an office. You know, can you find another place to go? I had heard then that John Corona had an antique store and they were closing it down. So I went to John Corona. He says, well, check with them, you know, that space is available, make arrangements with them for you to take it over, and I'm happy to rent to you. I had a good reputation. You know, I always paid my bills. So I did, and we worked out the financial arrangement. I think I had to buy the gates, and that was it, you know. And then I had to rebuild another gallery, and this address is 321. I think that's it, 321. This is the last of the galleries. I don't think there's going to be any more after this. It's like a countdown.
When did you open the doors here?
This, let's see, I'm here in this space now 40 years. 4 years at 296, 6 years at 278, that's 10, 40 years here.
That's interesting. So that means you had really just moved in when I met Rajeev and started coming here.
We came back from India pregnant. Rajeev was made in India. And so he was born here, not quite 9 months later, you know, like maybe 8 months late, no, 7 months later. So he was like 4 years old. So school, he didn't start school yet. I guess you're right. He started here. So you guys hung here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was had just opened the doors pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. I know there's some interesting stories in the space here. I know that, like, the wood in the background, you were telling me about how that came to be.
Yeah, this wood wall, this has been with me for 50 years. I've taken it from gallery to gallery. When I moved in the back of the first store, like I said, it was a huge space, so big that you can ride a bicycle in it. And I did that to get warm sometimes. I couldn't heat up the whole space, so I put up a wall with plastic, you know, and where I lived to try to keep the heat in. If I had to do it again, I'd make a bunk bed because the heat rises. Instead, I was on a level ground, and I had the stove pipe going over to get the heat, and the stove was right next to my bed. But I needed to separate the gallery from the studio from where I lived. And Nevins, which was the first boatyard that went down and was the playground for the kids, and there was this huge span of dock that went out that the kids would fish and swim off of. There was all this dock wood laying around. And I said, that's perfect. I loved it. I carried back the planks. So this wood is old, and it's part of Nevins dock. And I would carry a plank on either shoulder. I was a lot younger. I was 25 years old. And I'd walk down City Island Avenue with this dock wood on either side. And I had a golden retriever, Pandora, and she liked carrying a stick. So we would walk down City Island Avenue, she with a stick in her mouth and me with two planks on either shoulder. And I kept making trips until I built the back wall to separate, you know, the different spaces. And it turned out to be a great wall to, you know, you could put nails into it and, you know, you'd never know it. So that's a little bit of history over there.
So 1978, you have your first child, Rajeev.
Right.
How did that change your life?
It made me I don't know if it made me more responsible. I don't think so. I don't know. Rajeev had to grow up being around a photographer. I didn't stop doing what I did. He learned to adapt, and I learned to adapt. He went wherever I went in the backpack, and when I go on a bike, I had the bicycle seat. So from the time he was an infant and he could go into a backpack, he would be attached to me, and I would go with, you know, my dog with him to Nevins to take photographs or do whatever it is that I wanted to do. I'd go into the dark room to develop my film, to print. He would be there with me. I mean, one of the things about film, when you develop film, you got to load it, or, I was doing, large sheet film, 4x5 and 8x10. You had to be in total darkness. For film, you had to be in total darkness. But Rajeev didn't mind that he was in total darkness with me, because he would be attached to me. And so he had contact with me, and he was okay with that. He never complained about it. And then when I would do the printing, when he was able to sit in a chair, I would have a stool and I would have him help me. When I would only make proof sheets, contact sheets, of what I shot, I would let him watch, because I would go through that quickly. I would tell him, too light, too dark, when to go into the next, bath. So he did that with me from an early age. So he learned photography, whether he wanted to or not, because he wanted to be, close to his father. And he learned from Neru how to make jewelry. So he was making jewelry, and we set him up so that he could make his jewelry, and that he sold his jewelry, and he would get to keep his money. Whatever he sold, he would keep. And so now he graduated. He went to SUNY Purchase, graduated with an art degree, and with a major in photography. Rajeev, I gave him my old Pentax at, I think, the age of 10. He knew how to, the camera it was totally manual. The light meter didn't work anymore. I taught him how to look at light, how to figure out the exposure without having to have a meter, how to pick out the f-stop and the shutter speed depending on the subject matter. He knew that at age 10. And he would go out and he would shoot around City Island, and he would come back. He would develop his film. He would print himself. I would just critique. I did nothing for him. I would just critique. This has to be burnt. This has to be dodged. Maybe, change the contrast of the paper. And he was proficient. At 10, he was as good as me. It got him into college. And when he got out, I said, okay, what do you want to do? He said, well, I don't want to be a starving artist like you, Dad. I want to become a carpenter. I don't know if he realizes it, but I had to think of things to keep him entertained in the gallery. He grew up in the gallery. His playpen was in the gallery. Everything took place in the gallery. He had an interesting life. I didn't think much of it. This is the way it is.
Yeah, I remember whenever we would hang out, we wouldn't go back to the house, we'd come to the gallery.
Come to the gallery.
Always the gallery. Birthday parties in the backyard.
That's right,
yeah.
Everything.
Everything was here.
You only went home to go to bed, to have dinner. So I came up with these things to keep him busy. So one of the things that I brought back was a big piling. And I think he was maybe 6 or 7. I gave him a bunch of nails and a hammer, nice size hammer, regular hammer. And I would say, okay, take the nail. The top of the piling was soft enough where you could put the nail in and it would stand by itself. You didn't even have to start it. You could just, and then I said, bang it in. With your 2 hands, hold a hammer and just bang it in. He loved doing it. So he would fill the whole top, that whole top of that big piling. All you could see were the heads of the nails. And that's what he did. I don't know if that contributed to his wanting to become a carpenter or not, but he ended up becoming a carpenter. He learned his trade. He worked for Frank Seebeck. Frank Seebeck, taught him uh, the craft of carpentry, and then it was time for him to go into the union, and then he became a union carpenter. But I think, you know, once you're an artist, and you take that with you, you know, wherever you go.
You mentioned a few times about the difficulties of making a living as an artist. So how have you managed to keep this going for 50 years?
You have to be adaptable. The gallery has gone through a lot of different changes. In the beginning, I made a living by doing portraits for people on City Island, restoration jobs. People would come in with their old photographs. I did it old school, you know, this is pre-digital. One of the things that I found on City Island with doing the portraits, I would ask $25 to do a portrait. City Island was going, when I came, through a transition. It started to become depressed here on City Island. People were losing their jobs because the boat industry, the boat building industry, started to go under. One of the things people ask me, what is the change that you saw for me happen on City Island? And I said, I always say it's when the boat industry, the boat building industry, when the boat yards went down and fiberglass came and you didn't need these gigantic boat yards anymore. City Island employed just about everybody who lived here. So if you lived here, you worked here. And it was a thriving community. And you had lots of stores, and the store that my first store originally was called Engel's Sporting Goods Store. It supplied all the work clothes for the people that worked here. Now you had to start leaving the island to go to work. So it was a difficult time for City Islanders. And I guess $25 was a lot of money. And I saw that was a problem. So the first family, maybe you remember them, the first family that I photographed was the Boudreaux. Do you remember the Boudreaux? You had a big family. Fran was the mother, Junior was the father, and then you had all the kids. Yeah, they would be older than you. Charlie, Hank, Helen, Charlotte. Eddie and John didn't live with them anymore. They were older and they had left. But there were all these kids. So Fran, the mother, knew that I did photography because she would see me. She lived on the avenue. She lived, you know where Mo used to have his convenience store? So she lived there. It was street level. It was like a basement apartment that was street level. She'd see me walk by all the time, and with my dog Pandora, and she said if I could photograph her kids and her, you know, and I had mentioned the amount, and I saw that was an issue. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll do it for meals in exchange. And so word got out that I would do portraits for food in exchange. So I would go to people's homes, I would take their picture, and then I'd be invited, once I go back with the picture, and I'd be invited for dinner. And I'd always go home with leftovers. So that saved me a lot of money. So I was making, I didn't have to pay for that, food-wise. I gained weight. I did pretty good. As far as paying the rent, I still worked as a lab technician. At that point, the guy who I worked for, Dr. Vahe Amassian, he was the scientist, the neurophysiologist at Einstein, he decided to become the chairman of the department at Downstate Medical Center. And he wanted me to go along with him because I was the only one at that point who knew how to run this computer. Because there was a transition with computers going to what we know today. But for that transition to happen, he still needed somebody to run the old computer. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to travel to Brooklyn. So I ended up getting a job, because I belonged then to the 1199 union. I got a job in genetics. How did I get a job in genetics? You know, it's far cry from neurophysiology. I went to see this guy, Sunil Shin. Great man. And he said, "What do you know about genetics?" I said, "I don't know anything about genetics." He said, "Well, how do you think you can do what I need you to do? I need you to grow cells. We're doing experiments on cells. We're doing cancer research, and we need these cells to, you'd have to make the medium. You'd have to, grow the cells. You'd have to," he gave me a whole list of things. And he said, "What makes you think you can do this?" I said, "Well, you would teach me. You would have to teach anybody, but I have lab background. I would pick it up quickly, and you could teach me the way you want me to do it. I won't be coming to you with any bad habits. I would be doing exactly what you want me to do." And it sounded pretty good. And then he looked at me and he said, "What are you really interested in doing?" I said, "Well, I'm really a photographer." He says, "You are?" I said, "Yeah." And then so we start talking about photography. And it turns out he almost became a photographer. He loved photography. And it was between science and photography. And he decided to become a scientist. And he gave up his photography. And that's what got me the job. That's what got me the job, that he loved photography. And he, in his mind, he was supporting a photographer by giving me a job. From there, I was able to go to photography school. So I quit my job in genetics. I told Sunil what I wanted to do. He was sorry that I was leaving, but he understood. I think I worked for him for 2 years. I went to photography school, and I get a call from Vahe Amassian. "I'll do whatever you want. You can work 1 day a week. Just come in, fire up that computer. I'll pay you full salary." I said, "Okay." How could I say no? It supported me going through photography school, which was great. I had saved enough money. What I did was, with my first wife, Susan, her name was Susan, I put her through Columbia University in speech pathology. That's what she wanted to be. And then she finished, she got a job. Then it was my turn. Then I was going to go to photography school. But we were able to save the money because I was able to go on Saturday, fire up the computer, make lots of money, and then come back. When we parted and I came to City Island, I still had that job at Downstate. So that income was just enough to pay for the rent and materials, my photography materials. After a while, I didn't want to do it. They wanted me to learn the new computer. And I just didn't want it. I mean, I wanted to devote all my time to the gallery and to my work. Both were a passion. And I just stopped going. I stopped going to Downstate. There's probably a check still waiting for me. I just didn't show up. I regret doing that. I should have, resigned, but I just stopped going.
And when was that?
That had to have been in the, if I opened up in 74, I would say that was before I went to India. So I would say that was around 77.
So you didn't have a supplemental income except at the very beginning of Focal Point.
That's right. Hey, I mean, what I did on City Island to, when Neru came back pregnant with Rajeev, and we're opening up Focal Point Gallery 2, you know, we needed money to build the gallery, to get it set up. We brought back a lot of stuff from India to sell. I went into construction. I knew a lot of people on City Island. They were carpenters, and I was strong. So I had a strong back. And basically, they would, whatever they would build, they had to tear down. You know, the old bungalows or whatever. You'd have to take something down to build something new. And that was my job. I was not a skilled carpenter. I was, my main tools was a wrecking bar, a crowbar, and a hammer. And point me in the right direction, say, take it down, and I would take it down. So I worked for a number of people. Dave Enfield, he's still on City Island, we're really good friends. Dave Enfield was, again, a good teacher. He taught me how to not kill myself. Take the hammer off of the ladder before you move it, you know? So he looked after me. I worked for Bob Adams, Sam Richmond. So I did a lot of, you know, labor work during that period to help support the gallery through that transition. I even became the janitor of the Masonic Lodge. There's a funny story about that job. Oh, I'm trying to think of the name. He was a really nice guy. He was from the Masonic Lodge. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name. He said, we need a janitor. Ron, do you know of anybody? And I said, yeah, me. You know, he said, well, you'd have to go in. This is what we'd pay you, which wasn't much money. But you'd have to go in early in the morning. You'd have to, there was 3 floors, the basement, the main floor, and upstairs where they had their ceremony. And you'd have to clean everything really well. But the perk is whatever food you find in the refrigerator, because downstairs in the basement was the kitchen. Whatever food is left in the refrigerator is yours. Okay, great. I took the job and I'm working every day. As a matter of fact, I would go there very early in the morning, do that, and then go to the construction job, which was always on City Island. Neru would keep the gallery open, and Rajeev was an infant at that time. He was born already. No food in the refrigerator. And we're like, hey, where's my perk? You know, I'm really working hard. And then, you know, 3 floors, and they weren't the cleanest of people. I'd have to really, the bathrooms, the scrub the toilets, the whole 9 yards. No food. Close to Christmas, this went on for many months. Close to Christmas, I go in, my routine, I open up the refrigerator. It was full of food. There was jars of pickles, jars of coleslaw, I mean buckets, chopped meat, hamburgers, the whole 9 yards, everything. I said, finally, I cleaned them out. I took all the food. It was more food than one family could eat. So I got in touch with Peter Coyle. I said, Peter, you need some food. He says, yeah, Ron, of course. I said, come. And I shared the food with people who I knew could use some food. And I then go to my construction, do that. I still can't think of his name. He comes and he says, Ron, you don't know what you did. I said, what? He said, you weren't wrong. They came too early They were supposed to come after you were there to drop off all that food. That was for a big party, Christmas party, that they were going to have at the Masonic Lodge, and I wiped them out. So I jokingly said to them, I guess I don't get a Christmas bonus. I said, look, I'll make things easy for you. I'll resign. He says, it wasn't your fault, Ron. They were not supposed to do it. I said, I know, but I don't want to make this difficult for you. So they couldn't find me because they didn't know I was actually down Tier Street. You know, the condos down Tier Street, I helped, take down some of the bungalows that were there.
Yeah, my dad did some work on those.
Yeah, so that's what happened with that. I ate good for some time.
But while you had the gallery here, you worked doing event photography, correct?
Yeah, I started to do more commercial photography with the beginning of digital. Before that time, the jewelry and the crafts that we had, which, as I had mentioned, Neru really was the one who created that business. I saw that how that happened in the very first gallery. Neru was an art student at the College in New Rochelle. She wanted to become an art therapist, and she had to take all these art classes, and one of them was jewelry making. And she would bring home the jewelry that she made. It was really good. She's very enterprising. And I said, you want to put it out and sell it? She said, yeah, sure. So we made a table, put it out, and it started to sell. My eyes lit up. I said, go make more. And she did, and she would make pendants. And at that time, my father was getting into lapidary work, and he was polishing stones, and he was making jewelry. That was a hobby for him. So Neru started to pick up some of the polishing of stones and turning that into jewelry. I set up my father. He would come out on the weekends and he would do it. And Neru's table started to grow because she said, well, now that I have a pendant, we need necklaces to put the pendants on. So she did the research, found out where the wholesalers were so she could buy chains. And then after she would buy chains, she would see other things that she could buy because she couldn't keep up with making the jewelry. So she would buy wholesale, nice things and selling it. I go like, that's making my life easy. I can just do my artwork. I mean, I can give the shows. I started giving shows to artists. That would bring the people here. They would see the jewelry. And I was able to be an artist doing photography the way I want to. I didn't have to do it for anybody except for myself. And I did that for a good length of time. And we would travel and we would buy and resell. And it worked in with the gallery. So the gallery the walls stayed clear for me. We started to get one showcase, another showcase, and then another showcase. And the gallery was full of showcases and selling all kinds of really handmade, fine quality jewelry that Neru made and that she bought. The internet comes into existence. I saw right away a decline. It was almost immediate. I always judged how we were doing financially by the end of Christmas. Christmas gave you an idea how you did for the year. And we were steadily doing really, really good. And then, boom, there started to be a decline in the beginnings of the internet. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't going up. It started to go down. It started to go down more and more and more. I became alarmed. Digital photography came into existence. I'm watching that whole process. Now, I know the history of photography. I know photography changes. It never has, from the beginning it was invented, has stayed the same. It has always changed. And I've appreciated historically the changes of photography. And when I saw Photoshop come into existence, I got onto it immediately. I got Photoshop into my computer. I was fascinated by it. They had it geared towards the darkroom. I understood it. It wasn't hard for me to slowly make the transition. And back then, we're talking about a long time ago, when Photoshop first came into existence. I'm forgetting what year that was, but it's pretty old already.
Probably 89.
It's
back.
It's up there.
Ways.
I got a scanner. The first scanner was a Polaroid scanner. There back then was the best scanner. I was thinking, because Neru was painting and selling her paintings, and certain paintings were very popular, and she would paint them over and over again. All right? She was able to sell her paintings faster than I was able to sell my photography. So I thought to myself, with digital now, I can take her paintings and scan it and print it. So I told her, just make one master and keep it. Don't sell it. I'll scan it and I'll print it, mat it nice, and we'll sell that. And you can sell it cheaper than the painting. And you won't have to paint the same thing over and over again. And then we can make note cards. And I can make note cards, and we can sell the note cards. So I was doing that with her stuff. And I started to do that with my stuff too. But the digital photography aspect, the cameras, they wanted too much money. I mean, I think it was Kodak had paired up with Nikon, and they came out with a 6 megapixel camera, which was considered, good quality already. Our phones now are more than 6 megapixels. You know how much they wanted for a camera like that? It was $50,000. I wasn't going to run out and go and buy that. So what I was doing was learning about Photoshop by scanning Neru stuff, and I figured, let me scan my negatives. I started to scan my negatives, and I started manipulating the negatives, and I, came up with interesting results. The only problem was the printing. Epson was one of the first printers to come along. So we tested out, me and a friend, we tested the new printers. In the beginning, the new printers, you'd make a print, you'd put it out on your window, and the next day it'd be gone. It would fade. The inks were not good. Good concept, but you're going to have to really do something about it to make it viable for artists. And I think a lot of artists started to say, come on, guys, make it so that we can use it. And sure enough, Epson, one of them, Canon, another one, those I think were the main, started to come up with better inks. And now what I use is pigments. And that's what's on the memorial wall. They don't fade, and they're water resistant. They don't run if water hits it, especially for the process that I'm doing now, the photo transfers. It's a very wet process. I was doing that for a while. I was wanting to go, switch over, and I only did that once Canon came out with the Canon 10D. That was the first digital camera that I could afford. High quality, 6 megapixels, nice camera for $1,500. I ran out and bought it. I taught myself how to shoot a wedding. I had to learn flash, and I went from available light to flash, when I shot a wedding. So I shot weddings, I shot anything that came along. I figured I'd figure it out. I didn't take any classes. I had enough appreciation for photography generally, and I think the schooling I had, the commercial schooling, taught me how to look at a photograph and figure out how it was lit if it wasn't lit by, available light. So I could look at something and say, okay, this is the type of lighting that they used. Do I like it? If it's good, I can do it, I can copy it. So I ended up doing a lot of weddings, and I was building up a wedding business. And I started to teach people, and that was supporting the gallery. I was working. I would go out and, I had assistants. I had, what were they? They were assistants, but apprentices, which means you don't get paid, right? You work for free, but I'm going to teach you. And I took that seriously. I taught a lot of people. I taught darkroom, but when it came to digital, it was like, okay, I'm going to teach you. I'll teach you Photoshop. I'll teach you how to shoot. And once they start working with me, making money, I split the money with them. So I had people watching the gallery, and I'd go out and shoot, or I would take an apprentice with me, and I would split the money if I needed double, if it was a wedding I couldn't handle myself. If it was more than 90 people, I needed a second shooter. And I would split the money with the person. Eventually, what I wanted to have happen, because I was the better salesman than anybody, I would sell it and send them out. But then guess what happened? The internet. Everybody, and cell phones. Everybody was putting their pictures up. Newspapers, magazines didn't have to hire photographers anymore. They didn't have to keep photographers on payroll. Right. They didn't have to pay medical anymore. They could save money by just going to the internet and grabbing pictures for free of whatever was going on. All of a sudden, experienced photographers were unemployed. That whole industry ended up being unemployed. And guess what they wanted to do? Shoot weddings. The wedding market got flooded. I had some of them call me up, Ron, you need another shooter? So no more wedding. Which, was okay, because I did weddings for a long time. I shot a lot of weddings. It's a lot of stress, physically. The physical thing I could probably do at this point, being 75, I don't want to. I could do it. It's the mental. I didn't want the anguish, the nervousness. I would have to be calm the whole time, no matter what was going on. Your equipment, the thing about digital, something's going to happen. Something's not going to work. Back in the day of film, I think maybe one camera had a problem. But out of all the cameras I ever used, I never had to send it to be repaired. You know how many digital cameras I've gone through? How many flashes I've gone through? No, digital, something's going to happen. You go shoot a job. Do you bring one camera? No, you got to have backup. Never before did I think about needing to have backup. I had to have 2 cameras. I had to have more than one. I had to have, you had to change your whole way of thinking and doing things. And I did. I learned how by trial and error. I knew right away that I needed a backup camera when my Canon 10D, I'm shooting a wedding, and everything is going nice. All of a sudden, I get an error message, 99.
No, I know that one.
What? Error 9. So right away, I'm thinking, I'm shooting a wedding. What do I do? So I think to myself, I know from, experience with computers that I was, running, and take the battery out and put it in, shut it off and turn it on. Maybe it'll reset itself. I shot the whole job without them knowing it, turning it on and shutting it off, popping the battery out and popping it in, taking 5 shots, error message 99. Take it out, put it in, shoot another 5, error 99. Shot the whole wedding, was successful, everybody was happy. I go to the expo, I go to the Canon dealership, and I go like, what the hell does error 99 mean? And they said, it means we don't know. I didn't want that to happen to me again. I quickly went out and bought another camera. I had flashes go on me. I had to go out and buy more than one flash. I always had to have backup, more than, But I made a living by shooting, events. And generally what has happened with the events that I have shot, they have asked me, they're yearly events, sometimes twice a year. They call me back. Like one that I really enjoy to shoot is Lavelle School for the Blind, which is here in the Bronx. It's a fantastic organization. I've shot their graduation for I don't know how many years now. And they just got in touch with me and asked me to shoot it this year, which will be towards the end of June. So there's a lot of events that, I still shoot. I've cut back on weddings. If it's a special type of wedding, I'll do it. The gallery, I can't give it away like I did back in the day with the jewelry and the crafts that supported the gallery. I hate to do it, but I have to charge the artist. And you can come here for your $20. You get your work seen. I try to promote the work as best as I can. I'm on every social media you can think of. I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I do a video, I announce it, I put it up. We have an opening, wine and cheese. You can eat and drink $20 worth of wine and cheese. So, I don't feel too bad. So that helps.
How many shows a year do you have here?
Well, back in the day, if you do the math, I started doing shows very early in the years of Focal Point. It was 12 shows a year. 12 shows a year. Now, it's like maybe every other month. I also rent, if an artist wants the entire space, I'll rent out the space. There's a show that's coming up in July. Robert Arthur King. He's an architect, and he loves to shoot the sculptures that are built into the buildings.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like an old school thing, that this is something with modern buildings that's not done anymore. But in the older buildings, you'll find some kind of really beautiful sculptural work that's part of the building. And it's very high up. A lot of people aren't even aware of it, but he is, and he photographs it.
I've seen his book.
Yeah. So he came to me just the other day, and he said, Ron, this would be his second time showing here. He said, I would like to put the work up. I said, okay, it's the same arrangement. It's $1,000 for the month, and I don't take a commission, and we'll have the opening, and I'll promote it. And the rest is up to you. Fine. So I'm okay for the month of July. It is, for me, it has been for a very long time, a month-to-month thing. But I try not to worry about it. I figured I put in 50 years. We'll see. Maybe I can still continue doing it. COVID, that was a difficult time. COVID was not easy. But again, I don't think I could do this anyplace else but on City Island. A lot of people said, you'd do so much better with your work if you were in the city. The gallery would be great. Your artwork would be fantastic. You'd sell. I wouldn't have survived. Yeah, I would have gotten, exposure, but I would have gone out of business because the rents are crazy. City Island has made it possible for me to be here for 50 years. And it's a community. It's a family. It has become my family. I mean, a lot of new people have come, but I think the people who have seen me be here for the 50 years, I think want me to stay. Just like Addie wanted me, you know, you're leaving, no, that store's gonna be waiting for you. Red, you gotta leave, but find another place first. I came here because they wanted me to be here. So, you know, I kind of feel like it's meant to be.
I think you're an honorary clam digger at this
Yeah,
point.
I want a plaque. I want a plaque saying honorary clam digger. But I'll give you an example of how City Islanders are. So during COVID, you know, I felt, you know, everybody said only essential businesses could be open. Well, I felt I was essential. What made me essential is that I felt that I was stability. People were used to seeing me be here every single day. And I felt to add some normalcy to a really bad situation, it was important for me to be open. And if anybody came in and questioned that, you know, you're supposed to be closed, I would say, well, this is my studio. I'm working, you know, I'm doing my artwork. I'm not open for business. But it never happened. So people saw that, and people did come in, and they wouldn't say anything. And they would slap something down onto my desk, and then they would say, goodbye. And I would take a look. There'd be a $100 bill. There'd be a $50 bill. There'd be a few $100s. And that would happen. COVID went on into the beginning. I'm not sure if it was the first, but it was Halloween. We couldn't have the Halloween parade, right? That was an important event on City Island. So I think it was a day or two before Halloween. Papagayo and his band, the Days of Wild, he came to me and he said, Ron, I want to play music outside. You know, we got to have some kind of normalcy. No Halloween, we can't have that. We got to have music, and it'll be outside. Can we do that outside of your gallery? I said, absolutely. Let's do it. You know, people be outside, they can wear their masks, and we'll have music out on the street. We set it up, I advertised it, said you got to come with your mask, your safety precaution, keep your distance, but there'll be music at this particular time, and people did come. People came, and it was a great thing. People were able to unwind from what was going on. Richard DePiero, he owned the Black Whale. He wasn't running it anymore. Calliope had taken over. And he came by, and he saw the music. He came in, he says, Ron, this is fantastic. This is great. I thank you so much for doing this. This is great. We needed it. And he looks around and he looks at my note cards. He takes out some note cards. And he says, okay if I pay with a check? He says, Rich, because he helped all the artists back in the day. Back when I first came, he would let me come into his Black Whale with my dog. A bowl of ice cream was put down for the dog, Pandora, and I would get a chocolate cake with ice cream and I didn't have to pay. He employed Warren, he employed all these people, you know, artists back in the day who needed other jobs to support their stores. Richard DePiero was that type of person. So he writes out the check, and I go and look at it, and it's $5,000. I go, Richie, what are you doing? He says, Ron, don't worry about it. I make that in a week. Take the $5,000.
I remember during COVID seeing on Facebook you start a project, a photography project.
Yeah, I saw that, you know, the doctors and the nurses were getting a lot of credit, as they deserved to during COVID. But I remember having a delivery, you know. I go like, here these people working, and they're working, taking their chances by doing deliveries, construction, working in the supermarkets, the essential businesses that had to continue to be there. They could not work at home. They didn't have that luxury. I remember, I think it was Peter Chadwick. He was standing, I'm coming to the focal point. Peter is standing at the bus stop. And I go like, Peter, what are you doing? He says, I'm going to work. I've known Peter, for so many years. I know the whole family. I go like, I didn't know what he did. So he said, well, I work for Verizon. Now, more than ever, we have to have, everybody's internet on. So he had to go to troubleshoot and go into people's homes. He really was risking himself being exposed by going into people's homes to make sure that the internet was working. So I thought, well, Peter, I got to take a shot at you. So I took a picture of Peter. I put it up on Facebook, and I wrote, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for risking your life to help us. Something like that. Then I thought to myself, how many other people out there? The gas station, the people who work at the gas station, the people who work at the supermarket, the UPS, the FedEx, all these people. I would go to Orchard Beach every day. They still maintain Orchard Beach. They still went to work there. If you think about it, there were a lot of people keeping things going besides the doctors and the nurses. So I would take pictures of them. I would go back and give them their pictures, and I would post it on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and saying, mentioning their name, thank you for, your service and risking your life for us. So that was one of the projects that I got involved in during COVID. The other thing I did during COVID, again, to try to have people feel some kind of normalcy. Everybody's stuck at home. So I had all these Polaroid portraits that I did back in the day. I used to do, I still do, portraits during the Arts and Crafts Fair. During Mother's Day, I do portraits. Back during film, Polaroid had a 4x5 film called Positive Negative 55. It was N55. It gave you an instant positive and you would get an instant negative. And I started using that film in 1975. I would give the positive to the person, and I would have the negative. And I always thought to myself, someday I'll have the negative to print. I didn't know that I would end up printing it by scanning it. So I had this whole collection for a long time until they discontinued, and then I had to go to shooting it digitally. So I had this big volume of Polaroid negatives. So I started scanning them and putting them up. I started taking old photographs that I did of City Island and putting that up, saying, do you remember? And so it kept people occupied and interested.
So you had some time to go into your archives and dig into stuff you hadn't looked at in many years, I'm sure.
Yeah, so COVID allowed me that time to go ahead and do that. So I spent that time scanning, and putting up those images.
When I think of your 50 years here now, it's all very intertwined, you and City Island, because I see your work and I see how you've documented life here.
That was unintentional. I did not set out saying, this is what I'm going to do. In between photographing, the the different events. And I've gotten paid to shoot people's, birthday parties, baptisms, that's.
But at the same time, you were out there even 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah.
Photographing just because.
I like to, because I want to. And that, I just enjoy to do. But in between doing that, I've gone, I've gone to India, I've gone to Peru, I've gone to Mexico many times. Mexico was a great trip. Mexico, I did that in 1980, I think. I think that was around 1980. Rajeev was 2 years old. You can do the math. Packed him up, and Neru in a pickup truck and camper that I got from Addie Esposito, and wanted to be an itinerant photographer in rural Mexico, do portraits and give them back to the people. And I shot 8x10s and 4x5s, made contact prints using the sun, and would go back and give back the pictures to the people. So in between, photographing City Island, there was trips like that, a lot of experimentation. I came up with a process of my own called the PhotoTern, which was a photochemical painting. Did that for a number of years. The trip to Peru, Mexico, cross-country trip, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. So there's been a lot of things in between it. So it hasn't just been City Island. City Island has definitely been a training ground for me. If it wasn't for City Island and my doing what I did in the early days, I couldn't have been able to go to Mexico and, do large format photography.
Well, so nowadays, if you want to go someplace exotic for 3 months, you can bring a camera and a laptop and an SD card. Well, back then, what did you have to bring with you with film?
Doing that, I would bring all the chemicals, the trays. I would turn wherever I was into a dark room. I would process the negatives. I would look at the negatives and see, how I was doing. Can you imagine shooting and then you didn't know, you bring back all this film and something was wrong with the camera? I didn't. When I went to India, which was my first major trip, first time I really traveled, I was like thrown into a world that was like nothing I had ever experienced. Nothing was the same. The smell, the sound, the taste, everything different. And I went with my 8x10, my 4x5, and I had a 2 1/4 camera. I brought all that, all the film. I brought trays, I brought the chemicals. So it was fun going through customs. I gave everybody a photographic lesson. Things weren't as bad as they are now. But I was able to, develop the negatives. That particular trip, I felt I was doing all these basically portraits of people, some scenic shots, but I gravitated to the people. And it helped being married to an Indian. They found us very curious that we would be together. I sent back whatever pictures I could to my brother-in-law so that he could then give them back to the people. The places that we went, that wasn't possible. We ended up in Nepal. We went to a lot of places where that wasn't always the case. But that's where the idea of being an itinerant photographer and giving back the pictures, that's when I came up with the idea of where's it a place that I can get to. At first I thought a cross-country trip, but then I thought Mexico may be better. and do the large format, which I was familiar with and I was trained to do back in the day of school, and then perfected it somewhat here on City Island. Back in the day, what they did, if you wanted to make it permanent, you had to use gold chloride. Even back then, it was expensive. We're talking about gold. You had to replace the silver with another metal, and so that was gold chloride. Because otherwise, it would continue to darken out because it would always be exposed to ultraviolet light. So I experimented. One of the things about me, I don't know how to leave well enough alone. You can see that in my photography, even in digital. I started experimenting with chemicals. And I became familiar with a lot of chemicals because of my chemical paintings called PhotoTerns. By the way, my grandmother was the one who coined that phrase, PhotoTerns. Mutti. When I showed her, I was all excited. I said, I can finally combine my desire to paint with photography. I was making the two come together. And I was all excited, and I spent time doing that. And I showed her. She says, who else is doing it? I said, nobody that I know of. It started out as an accident. And I explained to her the accident, and she said, well, we got to call. She's in my darkroom, and we're passing a bottle of scotch to each other. And she'd call it schnapps, but, you know, we're drinking, and she says, you got to call it something. You know, got to get your name in there. So she came up with PhotoTern. So it's PhotoTern. And I wrote an article on it. It was published in Darkroom Photography. So I came up with the last chemical that seemed to work was selenium. You'd make the contact print, take it out, go into a water rinse quick, and then go into selenium. Selenium, which is a well-known photochemical for photographers in the darkroom. They used it back then to make the print more permanent. Again, because silver tends to oxidize. Selenium is a metal that's more stable. Very toxic, but you got to be careful. So I tried selenium, but not for that purpose. It gave it a beautiful sepia look. And then I would wash it, and then I had a permanent print that I could go back, and selenium was pennies. So I went and I did, all I needed was to get one person to agree to let me take their picture, and I would go back the next day and give it to them, and then the whole village would know. And I would have people who wanted me to take their picture. And when I was, because I was in very rural Mexico, and when I would be finished, everybody who wanted to have their picture taken, we'd break camp and go to the next place. We would find out where they made this or made that. I'd take pictures. We'd buy this, buy soapstone boxes, buy, silver, buy ceramics. Man, that camper was filled with stuff. No problem. They didn't care when we ended up coming back.
So did you road trip down to Mexico
Yes.
the whole way?
Yeah. Drove all the way.
Because of all the stuff you needed to buy?
Yeah, we drove and then, would then drive back filled.
Wow.
After my experience in Mexico, I coined myself the memory keeper. How that happened was very early on in my trip to Mexico, where I was doing portraits for people and giving them back the pictures. Right in the very beginning, came across this very small village, and there was an old lady holding about a 2-year-old baby. I'm photographing people, and I felt someone staring at me, and I had my 8x10 on the tripod, and I turned around and I saw this old lady and child. And I was like, whoa, what a picture. I mean, her face was lined and the baby, big eyes. I swung the camera around and it was setting sun. I threw in a film holder, set my shutter speed f-stop very quickly, pulled the slide, made the exposure. I think I got 2 exposures out. I knew I had something. I knew it. Went home, developed the negative, made the print. I went back and didn't find the old lady, but I found a couple, a man and a woman. And I showed them the picture. And I said, "Donde?" And they said, "Oh, es muerte." My Spanish is not good, but I knew what that meant. And I said, "Oh, yo siento mucho." And I pointed to the old lady, and they said, "No, no, no, niño, niño." I said, "No." And then they indicated it was their child. It was their child that died that night. And it turned out that that was the only picture that they had. And they, within this tragedy, found happiness because they had a memory, my picture. Rajeev was 2 years old. I went back to the camp. I told Neru, I hugged Rajeev, and I became overwhelmed, and I had to photograph every person I saw, because now I was the memory keeper. And that's, I think, what led to doing the memorial wall. Scott Ruderman, a filmmaker like yourself, had a project. He needed his thesis. He had to do a thesis, a documentary, to graduate the School of Visual Arts. And he saw the wall, and he met Lifeboat Louie. Now, Lifeboat Louie is one of the characters of City Island who I've photographed many times. Actually, one of the first people I photographed on City Island. He came right into my gallery back in 1974, and I did a portrait of him. And Scott was interested in the wall, asked somebody, he wanted to meet, different people at City Island. And I don't know who it was, but they sent him to me. We hit it right off. He told me his project, and I like helping people. And I said, yeah, sure. I thought it was going to be a short thing. It turned out to be a year-long project of him being with me almost day in and day out. He did a lot of footage of Lifeboat Louie, of me, and he asked me a lot of questions, a lot of interviewing. I mean, that you never got to see. He did a lot of footage and followed me wherever I went. So he has a lot of raw footage that I think of Lifeboat Louie and of me that would, you could probably put together and make a couple of more films. And he had to support his thesis. He had to be shown in a theater, and he had to answer questions. We all went to go to that. Lifeboat Louie, Joe, his brother, Lifeboat Louie's twin brother. We were all there. Did you guys go to that?
Yeah,
I
we were
thought
there.
so. You were there. And we watched the documentary, and he was asked questions, and he got his master's. He's gone on to be quite a successful filmmaker, and he's come up with a documentary, which is
Pay
called
or Die.
Yeah, Pay or Die.
Award-winning documentary.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, he's doing a lot of good stuff.
So later, you became a father a second time later in life.
Yes, that was with my third marriage. Yeah. Ruby. Ruby is now 20. She's going to be 20 on the 31st of May. Her birthday's coming up. It's hard to believe. Rajeev he's going to be 46. And Ruby is going to be 20. So there's a big gap there. Um, Ruby is also very talented. You know, she shows she can draw. She's very creative. She has wonderful ideas. She has always been fascinated with makeup, and she wants to be a makeup artist, but she wants to do, I think, theatrical type of makeup and special effects makeup. We'll see where it takes her, but she's been doing more photography. You know, the new photography is iPhone photography. She has her own page on Instagram. Her name is Ruby Rios. She has her mother's last name, Rios. She has her middle name is Terner, so it's Ruby Terner Rios. So
So she
yeah,
has
she-
the artistic side as
yeah,
well.
she definitely both. That's my grandmother's genes. She has strong genes, I tell you. It's a lot of people in the family show their artistic side, and I think it all comes from my grandmother. Yeah, Ann Kellogg, Mutti.
So Memorial Day was fun.
Yes, it was.
So we had a little bit of rain.
More than a little. Got drenched.
Have you ever seen rain like that during one of these parades you've covered?
Not that I can remember. I mean, City Island has been lucky with its Memorial Day parades. I think for the most part, they have not been rained on. This was the only one that I remember that it rained so much and so hard. But the parade went on.
I had a story about what brought on the rain we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah. A good friend of mine, Dan, a City Islander, he was dying of cancer. He knew, you know, the end was near. And I have on City Island what's called a memorial wall. And that's anybody who lived or worked on City Island who I happened to photograph over the years with the permission of the family and the person themselves wants their picture to go up there, I put it up. And over the years, there's over 200, more than 200 faces that are on that memorial wall, which is on the avenue. And Dan, he also goes by the name of Bird, Mike. He has many, Captain Mike, Captain Dan. Here's a picture of him.
Yeah, I remember him on his tricycle.
Yeah, he went from a bicycle to a tricycle, and he was a watchman at one of the boatyards. I've known him for over 40 years. He would joke with me. He says, "You could put my picture in the window, but you can't put it on the wall." And I said, "No, Dan, I'm sorry. If I put it in the window, you're going up on the wall." And he says, "Yeah, you do that, and when I go, your place is going to be flooded. It'll be a deluge." I said, "That's okay, Mike." So I put the picture, he passed, and so I did take it from the window, and I made even a bigger picture, and I put it up, the highest one up on the wall. So he's the biggest picture, and he's looking over everybody, because that's what he did. You know, City Island was his family. And I guess he was good to his word. Came the Memorial Day parade. It rained. It rained heavy. I got drenched, and so did my camera. So I guess he did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, it was within about a week of each other, I think, right?
Yeah.
From when you put his picture up to Memorial Day parade.
Yeah, I
rained
tried
out.
to update the wall just before Memorial Day. So it was a few days before the parade.
How did the wall start?
It actually started in back of the school, that which was called Nevin's Boatyard. When I came to City Island, it was one of the first boatyards to close, and what was left behind, all the buildings were gone, and they had broken ground already for the school. It was the playground for the kids of City Island. You had the dock, they would go fishing, swimming. I would go down there and take photographs. So I went there every single day, swim my dogs, and hang there. And I continued to do that for years and years, and I still do. And I had developed this transfer technique of being able to peel off my photograph off of the paper, making it into basically a giant decal and putting it on anything I want. And I would go to the furthest point of Nevins. Well, it's called now, it's a ball field now. I think it's called
Ambrosini
Field.
Yeah, here's my coach in Little
Right,
League. Yeah.
right. So there was the furthest point. There was a bunch of rocks, and I would sit there and just relax. And I thought to myself, it'd be nice to have my friends with me who have passed away. And I started taking the portraits that I had done of them over the years, of the people who had passed away, who were my friends, and put them on the rocks. So when I would sit there and relax and swim one of my dogs, I would see, friendly faces. And I started to do that. And before I knew it, a lot of the rocks were covered with faces. There was a group that organized a reunion, City Island reunion. I think it was the second one. And by that time, I think I had about 50 faces, or possibly more, on the rocks. And nobody knew about it. I would just, sneak behind the fence with my bucket, find the right size rock, put the face down. So I thought maybe for the reunion, I would let people know about it, to share, because these were all City Islanders. So on Facebook, Facebook existed already, I mentioned that this is what I had done, and then if people wanted to go see it, the gate would be open. So I got some bolt cutters. I snapped the lock so that the gate could be open, because I was sneaking behind the fence. I was able to squeeze through. I opened up the gate, and people came to the reunion, and everybody made a beeline to see the faces on the rocks. And the response was overwhelming. People came, they hugged me, they told me how happy they were. Some people cried with happiness that their loved ones were there to be remembered. So I continued putting faces on the rocks. We got a severe nor'easter, and it just pretty much washed it all away. I mean, that point got the heaviest of the weather. So at high tide, some of it would be covered up. So over a period of time, they started to peel away. And if you go there now, I don't think you could see any of the faces that are there. So people came to me and they said, you got to do something. We want that. We want you to continue doing what you're doing. Can't you find a place to do this? So I looked around City Island and I saw this long stretch of wood fence, which wasn't far from where the Jack's Bait and Tackle is. It was a boatyard that was called Royal Marina, and it was sold to Chaim Joseph. So I went to Chaim, who I had known for a long time, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he was intrigued by it. I, explained my process, and he said, yeah, sure, you can have that whole fence, that whole wood fence. And so I started to do that. And it's over quite a few years now. There's over 200 faces, and the wall is in pretty bad shape. Chaim is doing the best he can to keep that wood wall together. But right now, I think pretty much the pictures are holding that fence up. So I'll continue, you know, but there'll be a point when either a good storm is going to take it down, or the fence is just going to deteriorate to the point that it's not going to be feasible for it to continue standing.
Have you thought about what you'll do at that point?
If it does come down, that's the end as far as I can see. It's if people want to see it someplace else, it's a lot of money. I mean, it's all coming out of my pocket. But it was a little bit at a time. To have to do it all at once, you know, I don't think I could. I couldn't financially afford to do that. So a little bit at a time, I can handle it. You know, it's,
You said it's over 200 portraits now?
I think there's 250 portraits up there. And it's only done with the permission of the family. So most people like it. Some people are superstitious, but, you know.
No, I like it. I mean, I see my dad up there every time I come to City Island.
Yeah.
I like it. I like having it a lot, very much.
Yeah. That's the beauty of photography. You look at a photograph, and it brings back so many memories. I don't think a gravestone really does it. But, you know, a picture. I mean, when I look at those pictures, I remember everything I did up to that moment of taking the picture. I mean, I may not remember the person's name, but I do remember the person, and I remember what was happening when I took that picture of that person. So it's keeping the memories alive.
And you call it official name for it is?
I call it the memorial wall. I mean, other people have other names for it, which I'm not crazy about. But for me, it's the memorial wall.
And the reaction has been majority positive?
Yes. Yeah. People come to me and tell me how much they like it. Some people are afraid for me to take their picture. They think I have the power of life and death. If that was the case, there'd be a lot of dead people, because I take a lot of pictures. But for the most part, I think people really like it. Some people want to have a really nice picture, and they say, I want to pick out the picture. And it's sort of like putting a lot of pressure on me that I have to live a very long life, because some of these people are very young. And I look at them, I said, really? I don't know if I'm going to live that long. I'll do my best.
Okay, so here we are. You know, we went back to the beginning of Focal Point, 1974. Here we are in 2024. We're about 3 months away from your 50th anniversary. And what do you plan to do to mark the occasion?
Well, I picked the day, September, because that's when I opened up the gallery, was in September. Took me 2 months in the first gallery to get it ready, to clean it up and to turn it into a gallery and make it livable. And then the first exhibition I had was of my work in 1974. So since then, it's become, for me, a tradition that every September I have a one-person show, just my work. So I looked at the calendar and made sure I didn't conflict with anybody. So I came up with the date of September 7th. And if I produce enough work, I spoke to Egypt, who has the other gallery. Actually, 278, my second gallery, is now a gallery. It's called the City Island Gallery. And I've shown my work there a couple of times. It's a great space, and Egypt has done a wonderful job creating an exhibition space that I can have my work there as well for my anniversary. So I would have an opening here from 1 to 4, and then it would continue from, say, 5 to whatever, 10 o'clock over in the other gallery. So if you can't make it here, there'll be additional work there. So the pressure is on for me to produce work. So I had to think, what am I going to do? What am I going to show? Do I really want to do a retrospective? I thought about doing a retrospective. I started to write down all the categories, we talked about some of them, the trip to India, City Island, Peru, and, the chemical paintings, the PhotoTerns. And I said, I'm not ready to do that. I almost felt like a retrospective of something like that is like coming to the end. And I'm not ready to come to the end. I feel like I have a lot more to say photographically. So I'm still very active as a photographer. So I was still kind of thinking, well, what kind of show am I going to put together of my work? Laurie Hopkins, who is a painter friend of mine, saw Dan Treiber, who has the antique toy store. Dan was throwing out these old boxes. I think they were drawers or just different size boxes that were old and weathered. And Laurie saw them and said, I bet you Ron could do something with them. So she collected them and she brought them to me. And I looked at them and I went like, whoa, those are great. I can put pictures in them. And she said, I knew you could do something with it. So I had the boxes, laying there. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, I want to put pictures in them. They look great. I'll do a photo transfer and I'll put the pictures in. And I thought more and more about it. And then I came to, I've been following a page on Facebook called Inspired by Edward Hopper. And there's a lot of great photography that goes up that is inspired by Edward Hopper. They look like Hopper paintings. And I'm looking at that and I said, I got a lot of pictures that look like that. Old pictures that I did of City Island back in the day. I'd go around at night. One of the things I used to do is wander the streets at night of City Island with a tripod and take pictures of the streets, the houses, just scenes. And they looked like almost movie sets. That's the feel that I got. And I loved it in the snow, sometimes after a rain. The very first one I did was outside Focal Point Gallery 296. There was a Saab parked in front of Mr. Ford's place. And the streets were wet, and I took that picture. And it looked like it was from the 40s. It was done in 1974, but it looked back in the 40s, if not even earlier. And that's what got me going to photographing City Island at night. And then digital came along, and I continued, but I didn't need a tripod. I was able to use the techniques of digital, that no more tripod. That was great. I could get rid of my tripod. I haven't used a tripod since my Canon 10D. So I thought to myself, my digital images of City Island have, as well as the older images, have a strong feel of Hopper. And I started now taking pictures with that in mind. Before, I didn't. All I knew was, his famous picture, the Nighthawk, the picture of people in a diner, and maybe one other one. But it got me going into thinking about Edward Hopper. So now I take a look. Oh, he would have loved City Island. I mean, City Island is one big Hopper painting. It's amazing. And I realized I had all this stuff that was like his paintings. And I started to put it on the website, on that page. And, you know, it has to be judged and accepted, and then they would put it up. So I was thinking about the boxes, and I thought, okay, you know what? A box is sort of like isolation. It's separate. It's you put something in it, and it's isolated from everything else. And the more I thought about it, I said, well, that's what the feeling you get from a Hopper painting, is that quiet isolation feel. And I said, I'm going to put my Hopper-like images into those boxes. And then the thought went a little further. And I said, well, what about that would be like a whole collection of images. And I don't want them separate from each other. Like you hang a show, you have something framed and they're separate. And if somebody buys one, it's gone from the collection. I thought, I don't want that. I want to join the boxes together to make it one thought. So you can get into each individual picture and at the same time stand back and see the collection without it being separated. So I started to print. Instead of doing the transfers, I started to take them into the box. And then I had to, learn about different glues, and I made a pattern of the boxes being glued to each other. There was a lot of thought process going on in terms of where the picture would go in relationship to the other picture, where the box would fit with the other box so that it was a cohesive thought, and that the composition, one would have to lead to the other, and yet when you would stand back, the whole thing would work together. I make a sketch of the configuration. I have that then to put the measurements in, and then go back to the pictures, crop them to fit, print, cut them out, tape them in, and glue it all together. I realize I do that when I hang a show. You want each picture to work by itself, but you want the pictures around it to work as well, and not have one take away from the other. And I said to myself, wait a minute, I can do that with all the different areas that I have photographed over the years. Old City Island, New City Island, Mexico, Peru, India, the chemical paintings. I do a lot of nudes, how the nudes have gone through different transitions. I did mirror nudes. I did, the PhotoTerns, the chemical paint. I started to make a list, and I went like, whew, I've done a lot over the years of the 50 years of being on city. Self-portrait. I said, let me think, because I always do a self-portrait when I feel a change has occurred. I recently separated from a marriage, and I'm with somebody else now, and I realized, and I moved up above the gallery. I have an apartment now up above the gallery, so over the years I've gone from the back of my store, living in the back of my store, to now living above my store. So I had to do a new self-portrait of myself living in my apartment. So I made that as two boxes, one on top of each other. And that's when I came up with the idea for the title of the show, Then and Now. Because I don't feel as if I've stopped. I've continued. And it gave me an opportunity to go through the images that I had done in the past, because now I have to scan all these negatives from the period of when I was shooting film, and it's reinterpreting them and getting them for digital printing, which is very different than doing a print in the darkroom. So I don't feel as if I'm just regurgitating the same thing. So when I come up with an image I have printed in the darkroom in the past, and now I come up with a G-clay pigment print, that's what they're called now, it's a new interpretation. So I feel better about that when it's putting up something that I've done in the past. So now I need boxes. So I'm thinking to myself, well, where am I going to find all these boxes? I'm not going to come across boxes like that. I went around asking. I put the word out to people. If you come across any kind of box, bring them to me if it's being thrown out. And then I thought to myself, well, wait, cigar boxes. I started to look to see where I can find cigar boxes. And I found a place on Central Avenue called Mom's, or is it Mother's Cigar Factory. And they had, 6-foot high pile of boxes. And I started, I think they charged me $1 a piece. And sometimes they threw boxes out and they have it outside the store. And those are for the taking. But the boxes are beautiful. I mean, sometimes I don't want to even open them up. Here's an example. Here, boxes like this. And so here I would get, a box, and I would break it apart, and then I would make a pattern with the boxes, and then put my pictures in it. So far, I have made 25 boxes, everywhere from the self-portrait, and now I'm scanning the Peru images, which is still film. When I went to Peru, I was shooting film.
You're looking back, but at the same time, you haven't stopped looking forward.
Exactly. And looking back with fresh eyes, I'm finding negatives that I didn't print. That I go like, whoa, I don't know why I didn't print that. That's a nice image. Let me print that one. So when I'm going through the scanning process now of my old negatives, I'm finding some new work that I never really did anything with. So it's a reintroduction to what I've done, which is very refreshing. So I'm enjoying that process. So hopefully, I have a list of areas I have to do yet. I'll see if I can get it done in time. Enough to fill up the gallery and maybe put some up in the City Island Gallery.
What are you going for? You're looking forward. What are your goals?
Well, I plan to photographically just continue doing what I've been doing. I want to, I'm still for hire. I still have to make a living. So I'll, let's see, I have coming up, I have an event coming up. Reverend Jolly is retiring. I'll be photographing that at the Morris Yacht Club. I have a baptism. So, even though those are paying jobs, if I always come out with a couple of images that are very special to me, that I feel, that's my work of art. And the client will get that image, but I archive that as being an image for me, that happened to work. So from every job I shoot, I always end up with something that is special for me. So I always, enjoyed having a job, somebody hiring you to shoot, gives you an opportunity to get something that you normally wouldn't have gotten. And have you ever seen me without a camera? No, I feel naked if I don't have my camera with me. I don't know how much traveling I have ahead of me, my mom's 98. I don't really want to travel far from home. I want to be, you know, around, you know, my mom as much as I possibly can. You know, I think I'm extremely privileged to have a mother that has lived as long as she has. I lost my father 20 years ago. That was difficult. I lost my brother 2 years ago. That was very, very hard. My brother and I were really, really close. So that was difficult. And I think the thing that keeps me together is photography. It has been the thing that has, you know, kept me going. Yeah, if it wasn't for photography, I don't know what would have happened to me.
Again, like we were out there a couple days ago, and you're running up Tier Street to get to the cemetery to get in position to take your pictures. And again, you know, that was on your 75th birthday.
Yeah,
it's like I always see you, you know, going somewhere, taking pictures, and keeping very busy. You're here, I would imagine you're here 6 days a week usually.
7.
You are
These
here
days, I'm here 7 days a week.
Wow.
I'm here every day. I enjoy what I do. So, you know, it's interesting. Somebody said, "Do you ever take a vacation?" I said, you know, no, I haven't. And if I did, I'd be taking pictures. Mm-hmm. So I have Pelham Bay Park. I have, I think, 1, 2, 3, either 3 or 4 sets of boxes just on Pelham Bay Park. I could have done a lot more. I've done the people of Pelham Bay Park. I just don't have the time. I mean, that should be a set of boxes, because when I go to Pelham Bay Park, which is almost every day, I've been photographing the sunrise because I get out there in the morning to take Monita for her walk and her run, and sometimes for a swim. It's beautiful there, and I photograph the trees, the deer, and I never thought of myself as a landscape photographer. I really don't, still don't, but I have lots of photographs I love trees. I love trees. I love the way the sun, when it rises, hits the branches, and sometimes the silhouette of the trees, you know, the lines and the patterns that it makes fascinate me. I have a whole set of boxes in that. And no matter how many times I'll go to Pelham Bay Park, Orchard Beach, and look at the same tree, every time it's different. And to me, that's fascinating. And I always meet new people, and I'm shy. I was a shy kid, extremely, painfully shy. I wouldn't even go. I mean, it was painful for me to go into a store. If my parents sent me on an errand, I wouldn't want to go because I'd be afraid to go into a store. What if I got the wrong change? What if I didn't get the right thing? I mean, maybe it has to do with being Jewish. I don't know. You know, the guilt. It's like, it's just a difficult thing for me. As a kid growing up, I was shy. The camera allowed me not to be shy anymore. It somehow, I see something or something interesting. I see a person. Can I take a picture? What's the worst that's going to happen? No. Or why? And then I'll tell them why. The light on your face is beautiful. I'd like to try to capture that. Oh, really? Thank you. I'll come back, and you know, if you're here tomorrow, I'll bring you back the picture. And if the person says no, I prefer that you don't. Okay, I'm sorry, and I go on my way. You know, in all the years that I have done this, I don't think there's really been any occasion where I've run into a situation. So that camera has brought me somewhat out of my shell. I mean, photography. I mean, I used to be afraid of the dark as a kid growing up. I mean, I was one of those kids, you had to have every goddamn light on. My brother, you know, he shared a room with me. Oh man, he put up with a lot of shit. I had to have the lights on. I had a bathroom light. I had a night light. I was afraid of the dark. And he had to go to sleep facing me. I mean, I had a whole goddamn ritual. And here I spent a good portion of my life. Where? In a dark room. With no lights when I'm developing film. Something about photography that I think just saved my life, because I don't know where I'd be without it. I would be like, you know, an emotional, psychological mess.
And I know we talked a couple weeks ago about how I see how prolific you've continued to be, and maybe it's even accelerated as you've gotten older. But you said how you feel a sense of urgency.
Oh yeah. Being 75, having cancer, kind of does that to you. You know, I battled cancer. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer I think that's a little more than 10 years ago. I opted, fortunately it was caught stage 1. I opted to have the prostate removed. I went through that, but you know, you're told you have cancer. I think if you talk to anybody who has had cancer or who has cancer, they'll tell you that it changes your life. You know, I think it brings on that feeling of urgency. And over the 10 years, I mean, shortly after I was operated on, I think it was, I asked the doctor, when can I lift and when I can go back to doing, you know, any kind of strenuous work. He said in about a month's time. Guess what I had in a month's time? I had a wedding. Wow. I had a wedding. So I could find out by, you know, how long ago that was by, because they live on City Island, the people who I did the wedding for. And so all I have to do is ask them how many years they've been married. And that's when I had the operation. So everything was going well, continued with my checkups. That sense of urgency definitely was planted, was there. I recovered well. I recovered really very well, back to normal as far as everything went. And then I went for my checkups, and all of a sudden, my numbers started to go up, and they started to watch it. And he says, you know, we got to see. I don't know why, but, and he sent me for a special test, radioactive test to see if there's any cancer. Nothing came up, but my numbers kept going up. And he said, well, we got to send you to, you know, maybe you need, you know, radiation or. So I went to him. He says, oh yeah, you need to be radiated and you got to have hormone therapy. I went, oh man, I do not want to have radiation treatment. I go back to my guy. He says, nah, we're going to skip that. We're going to try the hormone therapy. So basically, they shoot you up full of estrogen. So I've gotten in touch with the female side of myself. Hot flashes, the whole 9 yards. Brought my numbers down. But going through all that, knowing that cancer is still there, you know, makes life different for you. I live each day as it's my last. I want to make the most of every moment that I have. So, and I said this to my mom. We were talking. I said, Mom, I want to, you know, I'm 75 now. I want to live so that when I die, I have no regrets. And she said, I taught you that. I said, well, you did a good job. And she says, and that's how I feel. There's a guy, his name is Pitbull. He's a rapper, DJ. And in one of his songs, he says, every day above ground is a good day. That's how I feel. Every day I wake up, first thing I do is pick up my camera. I check to see battery charged, everything set for going out. It's a good day. No retirement. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with Focal Point Gallery. The Focal Point may have to come to an end. If I can't support it anymore, that will be the end of Focal Point Gallery, but it won't be the end of my photography. You know, I'll continue working. And the whole idea of Focal Point Gallery was to be able to expose my work and other people's work. And one of the things that I included for at least, I think, more than 10 years was a mini magazine called The Viewfinder, a journal of Focal Point Gallery. Because I felt once the show came down, once my work or somebody else's work or anybody who I hung here in the gallery came down, that was the end. Nobody got to see it anymore. So before the internet, I thought publication. You have to publish. You got to get your work published and then just get it all over the place. So I created a nonprofit organization called Focal Point Press. So if somebody would have their work here with my work as well, because I always had my work here, I would select the images and publish a magazine. And it's called The Viewfinder. You can find them on eBay. I sent them all over the world, to every museum I could come up with, collectors, galleries, for nothing. And I raised the money. I raised money through that nonprofit organization called Focal Point Press, which had its nonprofit status, which somehow I was managed to get. I let it go defunct. It was a tremendous amount of work. Doing that, selecting the work, designing it, putting it together, then printing it and mailing it out. I, pretty much did everything myself. I did have a very good friend who I went to photography school with, Don Nestor, who was a major supporter of the gallery. When we graduated Germain School of Photography, he went on to be a working photographer. I opened up Focal Point Gallery, and he was very involved with Focal Point Gallery and had many shows here. And he was, my right side man. He helped me with so many projects. And, we knocked out some good viewfinders. You check them out. They're selling now, depending on which one, $10, $5.
I vaguely remember them.
Yeah, the Viewfinder, Journal Focal Point Gallery. I also published a couple of books. One called The 10-Year Retrospective of Focal Point Gallery, a whole collection of different artists who had shown in the gallery. Did the same thing with that. So when the idea was not to let the work die once it came off the walls.
So you were publishing for about a decade, and then the internet came along, and how did that change things?
Well, I saw an opportunity to get the work out there a lot faster and less expensive. To publish those viewfinders cost a lot of money. The mailing cost and the printing cost, that added up, and took up time. Raising the money for it took up a lot of time. Writing grants took up time. When the internet came, and I saw Facebook when it first came out, and what people were putting up, I saw an opportunity. I said, I could put up my pictures. Other photographers, were skeptical. They were afraid they were going to get ripped off. I have gotten ripped off, but
I felt the benefits outweighed the negative. And I jumped on Facebook. I started putting the images of City Island, the events that I photographed. People were enjoying it. They would reblog it. Next thing I know is I've got over 4,000 friends. I would shoot, I hope I get to that set of boxes, Rhythm and Review. That's a whole other area of photography that I love. People dancing. Musicians. That's another area of boxes that I have. I love photographing musicians. And City Island certainly has its fair share of musicians. With the Rhythm and Review, that's a dance that Felix Hernandez, he's a radio personality on WBGO, I started photographing his dance parties that he's a DJ for back in the days of Roseland. I think I've been photographing for him for more than 20 years. I have, 4,000 to 5,000 people follow him to go to his dances. And I would photograph the dances over the years. We became like a family. They would know me and they would look for the pictures that I then would put up on Facebook so that, I would share it with them. Let's see, after Facebook came, Instagram came. I jumped onto Instagram. Different format. I had to learn that format. My audience. So if I lose focal point, and I recommend this to every artist, if you like an audience, I happen to like an audience. I got an ego. I need an audience. I do it for myself. I truly do. But you like somebody to enjoy it with you. So I like that audience.
This is what I discovered for the first time, really, when my brother and I documented the bridge. I was like, oh, every day every day I chose to, and it wasn't every day, but I'd post a picture or I'd post a video clip. And some of them were really popular and get a lot of attention. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. Like, people are following what I'm doing. Like, they enjoy this. Like,
people liked it.
And then it makes you want to do it more.
Exactly.
And keep going back out there.
And how did it make you feel?
It really drove me to be like, you know what? I'm getting up at the crack of dawn and I'm going to go out sunrise and try to get a nice picture. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good feeling that somebody's appreciating your work. And I remember seeing that you did that. And how many shares did it get?
Some of those videos got tens of thousands of views. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And what you did, you documented something that was really important to City Island. And I really appreciate that you did that, and you kind of drove me into becoming more aware of the bridge. And I started to, I photographed the bridge, before that, not as much, in the snowstorm. But when you guys started really getting down to saying, this is something important to document because it's not going to be there anymore, and this is for historic purposes, I saw the value in what you guys were doing, and I said, yeah, no, this is good. And I remember, you would stay in touch with me, telling me, oh, they're going to be taking this down, they're going to be taking that down. Do you want to be there? And of course, I always did. So we actually started working somewhat together. And what warmed my heart the most was when you told me that they were going to take down the spire, right? And I think they took down the spire and the sign at the same time. And I said, yeah, the two of you are fortunate. You're like really tall. I'm really short. And I thought to myself, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do. And lo and behold, you came with a ladder for me. I was so touching. That was really wonderful. So I remember I had a great time shooting that whole event, and then continued to do that. And there's a whole collection of stills that I did of the demolition of the bridge.
So, but you guys did an exceptional job.
Thank you. Yeah, it was.
Really important. They should have that. I don't know if they do. Maybe they do at the Nautical Museum on City Island. They should have that on a continuous loop in
They
a room.
did at one point.
They should put
but
that
I'm
back
definitely
up.
gonna talk about. I was thinking back on all the stuff we did. I'm like, we put on Facebook, but now it's just sitting there. Like, I want people to see in the future too, right?
Yeah, because they get new people going up there
Yeah,
more and more.
yeah. But I mean, I'm sure you've thought about that. Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave to the community with your work?
I feel sorry for Rajeev because I told him I'm dropping it in his lap. He's going to be in charge of everything. I said, it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. Once I'm gone, that's it. It's nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. So if you leave a mark, I think the mark truly is how you touch somebody. My mark for you example, and I really appreciate that you wrote that in the Island Current. I was really touched by that you coming to Focal Point Gallery, you felt sort of like being around the artwork created an interest in art for you that led itself to videography. I went like, oh wow, I had no idea. So if you can go through life and do that, that's your legacy. I think that's more so than anything else. Just like my grandmother. Her legacy is, how she touched me.
It lives on through you, and
Right.
and then through the people that you come in contact with and inspire.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's intentional in my doing it for somebody else, unless it's a job that I'm being paid to do, and then I feel obligated. I have to please them. And I try to please myself at the same time. So if I can do both, then it was a good job. But generally, I'm kind of selfish. I try to please myself first. You've got to please yourself first. If you're not happy with what you create, it's not going to be good. So I try to make myself happy first. And if it makes somebody else happy, that's gravy.